The celestial hegemony had ruled the stars for 11 million years. They controlled more than 2,000 species across the Orion arm of the galaxy. Every civilization that had risen to challenge them had fallen. Every species that had developed space travel had learned the same lesson. Submit or die. There was no third option. High Archon Velthrix sat upon his throne of black crystal, surrounded by the holographic displays that showed him everything happening in his vast empire. He had lived for 9,000 years. He had seen species rise and fall like waves upon a shore. He had ordered the extinction of 17 civilizations that refused to bow. He felt nothing when he gave those orders. It was simply the way of things. The strong ruled, the weak obeyed. This was the law of the universe. The message from the Outer Rim arrived on an ordinary day. A scout ship had detected something unusual. A new species had developed faster than light travel. They called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. They had only discovered space travel 200 years ago. They were infants compared to the ancient powers of the galaxy. Velthrix studied the reports with mild interest. The humans had spread to 47 planets. They had built a small fleet of warships. They had developed weapons that were primitive but functional. They were exactly like every other young species the hegemony had encountered. Ambitious, hopeful, completely unaware of how small they truly were. The Grand Tribunal convened 3 days later. Representatives from all major species of the hegemony gathered in the Great Hall. The Rixval came with their forearms folded in contemplation. The Thexnar slithered in with their serpentine bodies coiled tight. The Morkai stood like statues of living stone. Each species had once been independent. Each had learned to bow before the hegemony. Now they served as loyal subjects, eager to prove their worth by helping crush any new threat. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be given the standard choice: surrender unconditionally or face total destruction. Velthrix recorded the declaration himself. His voice echoed through the chamber as the message was broadcast across every frequency that humans could receive. He spoke slowly so the translators could work properly. He wanted them to understand every word. Species designated human. You have violated the sovereign space of the celestial hegemony. Your expansion ends now. You will surrender all military vessels. You will dismantle all weapons. You will accept permanent oversight from hegemony administrators. Your leaders will present themselves for judgment. You have one standard galactic rotation to comply. Failure to do so will result in the complete eradication of your species. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is your only chance to survive. Choose wisely. The message traveled at the speed of light toward human space. Velthrix expected the response within days. He had seen it happen dozens of times before. First would come the desperate pleas for mercy, then the frantic attempts at negotiation, then the pathetic military resistance, then silence. Always silence in the end. Ambassador Chen Wei was drinking coffee when the transmission arrived. She was aboard the ESS Horizon, humanity's first dedicated diplomatic vessel. She had spent 30 years studying alien cultures that humans had never met. She had prepared her entire life for first contact. She had imagined it would be exciting, historic, perhaps even beautiful. She read the declaration twice. Then she put down her coffee cup and did something that no species had ever done before in response to a hegemony ultimatum. She laughed. It started as a small chuckle. Then it grew into a full laugh. Then she was laughing so hard that tears formed in her eyes. Her assistant rushed in, thinking something was wrong. Chen Wei just handed him the tablet and watched as he read the message. Within seconds, he was laughing too. "Is this real?" he asked between breaths. "Apparently so," Chen Wei managed to say. "They actually expect us to just give up. They sent us a form letter for extinction." She forwarded the declaration to Earth with a single note attached. "You need to see this. Trust me." The message reached Earth 6 hours later. Within 12 hours, it had been leaked to every news network on every human colony. Within 24 hours, something remarkable had happened. Something that the hegemony could not have predicted in 11 million years of galactic domination. Humanity turned the declaration into a joke. The first meme appeared on Mars. Someone had taken Velthrix's image and added cartoon eyebrows and a tiny crown. The caption read, Local space tyrant demands you surrender your vibes. Within an hour, it had been shared 50 million times. A musician in New Tokyo auto-tuned the entire declaration into a dance song. It hit the top of the charts within 2 days. People were dancing to the threat of their own extinction. A comedy show in London performed a sketch where actors pretended to be hegemony officials, confused by human customs. The alien characters could not understand why humans kept offering them tea and asking about their feelings. A group of engineering students built a small drone that broadcast the declaration on repeat while flying around their campus. They called it Doombot and dressed it in a tiny cape. The human military began their preparations for war. Admirals studied the limited intelligence they had about hegemony forces. Generals planned defensive strategies for every colony. Scientists worked around the clock to improve weapon systems. But even as they prepared for what might be the end of their species, they could not stop making jokes about it. Admiral Jackson addressed her fleet from the bridge of the carrier Indomitable. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have made some very large aliens very angry. They want us to surrender. They want us to give up everything we have built. They want us to stop being human." She paused and smiled. "I say we disappoint them." The crew cheered. Someone in the back shouted that they should send the aliens a fruit basket to apologize for existing. Another voice suggested including a card that said, "Sorry for being so loud." Chen Wei composed humanity's official response. It took her 3 days to write something that the United Earth Council would approve. The message was polite but firm. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not dismantle its weapons. Humanity would defend itself if attacked. But there was something else in the message that made it different from anything the hegemony had ever received. It included a joke. "We have received your declaration and given it the consideration it deserves. Humanity respectfully declines your generous offer of extinction. However, we would like to invite your representatives to visit our planet. We have excellent restaurants and our sunsets are quite beautiful. We find that most conflicts can be resolved over a good meal. Please let us know your dietary requirements so we can accommodate your needs. We look forward to hearing from you soon." Chen Wei added one more line at the end. "P.S. Is the outfit your High Archon wears required by law, or is it a personal choice? Asking for a friend." The response traveled back toward hegemony space. Velthrix received it with complete confusion. He read it several times. He had his translators check for errors. He consulted with the Rixaval experts in psychological warfare. None of them could explain what was happening. In 11 million years of galactic conquest, no species had ever laughed at a hegemony declaration of war. No species had ever responded with jokes and invitations to dinner. No species had ever mocked the sacred robes of the High Archon. Velthrix stared at the message for a long time. Something cold settled in his ancient heart. It was not fear exactly. He had not felt fear in thousands of years. But it was something close. It was uncertainty. For the first time in his very long life, Velthrix did not know what would happen next. And somewhere in human space, Ambassador Chen Wei was already planning what food to serve at the welcome party she was certain would eventually happen. She had seen the darkness of the universe. She had studied dead civilizations and dying stars. She knew humanity might not survive what was coming, but she also knew one thing that the hegemony did not understand yet. Humans did not need hope to keep fighting. They just needed a good joke to tell while the world burned around them. High Archon Velthrix had not slept in 4 days. This was unusual for him. He had lived 9,000 years by maintaining strict routines: sleep, meditation, the careful management of an empire that spanned a quarter of the galaxy. But now his routines were broken. Now he spent his nights staring at reports that made no sense. The humans were not behaving correctly. He summoned the Rixval High Seer to his private chambers. The Rixval were the masters of psychological warfare in the hegemony. They had broken the minds of entire civilizations. They had studied fear and despair for millions of years. If anyone could explain what was happening with the humans, it would be them. High Seer Kethril entered with her forearms clasped in the posture of deep concern. Her black eyes reflected the dim light of the chamber. She had been studying human broadcasts for 3 days straight. She had never seen anything like them. "Tell me," Velthrix commanded. "Tell me what is wrong with these creatures." Kethril took a long moment before answering. "They are not afraid, High Archon. We have monitored their communications. We have analyzed their biological readings from captured broadcasts. Their stress hormones are actually decreasing. When they see images of our fleet, their anxiety goes down. Not up, down. Velthrix leaned forward on his throne. That is impossible. Every species fears death. Every civilization trembles before superior force. This is the foundation of our power. I know, Kethral said quietly, and yet the data does not lie. The humans find us amusing. They have turned your declaration into entertainment. Their children sing songs about us. Their artists paint us in bright colors with silly expressions. A human cultural unit called a meme has spread across their network. It shows you wearing what they call a party hat. Velthrix felt something twist in his chest. It might have been anger. It might have been something else entirely. Send the observation fleet. I want to see these humans for myself. I want to understand what madness has infected them. The observation fleet departed within hours. 50 ships carrying sensors and specialists crossed into human space. They were not there to attack. Not yet. They were there to watch and report, to find the weakness that every species possessed, to discover what humans truly feared beneath their strange behavior. Commander Thexal led the observation mission. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns. He had watched species crumble before hegemony might more times than he could count. He expected this mission to be routine. Find the cracks in human confidence, report back, begin the invasion. What he found instead gave him nightmares. The humans knew the observation fleet was there. Their sensors were primitive but functional. They tracked every ship. They knew they were being watched, and their response to this surveillance was perhaps the strangest thing Thexal had ever witnessed. They waved. Human ships flew past the observation fleet with their crews visible through viewports. The humans smiled and waved at the alien vessels. Some held up signs with messages written in the hegemony standard language. "Welcome to human space," one sign said. "How was your trip?" said another. A third sign simply said, "Honk if you love existential dread." Thexal did not know what honk meant. His translators could not provide context. On the human colonies, life continued almost normally. People went to work, children attended schools, families gathered for meals. But there were differences that the observers noted with growing concern. Human soldiers had started a betting pool about which hegemony ships looked the funniest. The current favorite was a Morkai dreadnought that one soldier said looked like an angry potato with engines. The prize for the winner was a bottle of something called whiskey and the right to name the first captured alien vessel. Human engineers were designing welcome banners to hang on their defense stations. They debated color schemes and font choices while simultaneously upgrading their weapon systems. One engineer suggested they should include snacks for the invaders because long space journeys were tiring. A group of teenagers on Earth had created an elaborate hoax claiming they had befriended an alien scout. They produced fake photographs and videos that fooled millions of people for almost 2 days before admitting it was a joke. The teenagers became celebrities. They were invited to appear on entertainment programs across human space. The human military was preparing for war. This much was clear. They were building fortifications. They were training troops. They were stockpiling weapons and supplies. But their communications showed no despair. No final messages to loved ones. No desperate prayers to whatever gods humans believed in. Instead, there were arguments about which old movies had best predicted the alien invasion scenario. There were debates about whether this situation counted as official first contact for the purposes of various betting pools. There were discussions about what kind of food aliens might like and whether it would be rude to offer them something that might be toxic to their biology. Thexal filed his report with a note of genuine bewilderment. They know they are outmatched. Their own military calculations confirm this. They have run simulations showing their defeat in 97% of scenarios. Yet they prepare for war the way they prepare for entertainment. I do not understand these creatures. I am not certain they understand themselves. Velthrix read the report in silence. Then he read it again. Then he threw the data tablet across the room hard enough to shatter it against the wall. "They mock us," he said to the empty chamber. "They think we are a joke." He summoned his war council. The greatest military minds in the hegemony gathered to discuss a species that should have been a simple footnote in their long history. The conversation went in circles for hours. No one had ever encountered anything like this. No one knew how to fight an enemy that refused to be afraid. Perhaps we should simply attack, suggested Admiral Crix of the Thexnar fleet. Once they see real destruction, they will learn fear. All species learn eventually. Velthrix nodded slowly. Yes, a demonstration. We will show them what we can do. We will break one of their moons. Let them watch it happen. Let them see their helplessness written across their sky. The order was given. A hegemony battle group moved toward an uninhabited moon in human space. It was a barren rock with no military value, but it was large enough to be visible from the nearest human colony. Millions of humans would see what happened next. The weapons fired. The moon shattered. Fragments the size of mountains tumbled through space. The light of the explosion was visible across 3 solar systems. It was a display of power that had brought 43 species to immediate surrender. Velthrix waited for the human response. He expected terror now. He expected pleas for mercy. He expected the humans to finally understand their place in the universe. The response arrived within hours. It was an invoice. The document was signed by something called the Lunar Development Corporation. It demanded 4.7 trillion credits for unauthorized demolition of future resort property. It included additional charges for emotional damages and disruption of planned construction schedules. It requested that the hegemony provide their insurance information for processing. Attached to the invoice was a video. It showed humans in yellow protective hats standing near the debris field. They shook their heads sadly and muttered about permits and zoning violations. One human looked directly at the camera and asked if the hegemony was aware of the paperwork required for moon destruction in this sector. Velthrix stared at the message for a very long time. Somewhere deep inside him, in a place he had not visited in thousands of years, something cracked. It was not his confidence, it was not his power, it was his certainty. He had conquered 2,000 species. He had ruled for 9,000 years. He had never doubted that fear was the ultimate weapon. But now, watching a species laugh in the face of extinction, High Archon Velthrix of the Celestial Hegemony felt something he had not felt since he was young. He felt confused, and confusion, he realized with growing unease, was just the first step towards something much worse. The destruction of the moon should have broken humanity. It had broken 43 other species before them. The sight of a celestial body shattering into a billion fragments was supposed to demonstrate the hopelessness of resistance. It was supposed to make people weep and beg for mercy. Instead, humanity launched a cultural invasion. It started small. A human entertainment company released a movie called The Visitors within 2 weeks of the moon's destruction. The film depicted hegemony soldiers as confused tourists who could not understand human customs. There was a scene where an alien commander tried to order coffee and accidentally declared war on the coffee shop. Another scene showed aliens attempting to use human transportation and ending up on the wrong planet entirely. The movie broke every box office record in human history. The Rixval Psychological Warfare Division intercepted the film and studied it carefully. High Seer Kethral watched it 17 times. Each viewing left her more disturbed than the last. They are not just ignoring our threat, she reported to the War Council. They are absorbing it, transforming it, making it part of their culture. In 2 weeks, they have turned our invasion into entertainment. This was only the beginning. Video games appeared featuring hegemony villains that players could defeat using increasingly ridiculous methods. One popular game allowed players to defeat alien invasions by organizing really good parties. Another let players negotiate peace treaties using only food-related diplomacy. A third was a puzzle game where players had to help confused aliens understand human jokes. Music spread across human space. Songs about the invasion ranged from defiant anthems to silly comedy tracks. A children's musical group released a song called The Aliens Want to Be Our Friends that became the most downloaded track in 3 human sectors. Parents reported that their children were no longer afraid of the news about the hegemony. The children thought aliens were funny. Human artists painted the High Archon in every style imaginable. There were serious portraits that showed him as a tragic figure. There were abstract works that reduced him to shapes and colors. But most popular were the comedic versions. Velthrix wearing human clothing, Velthrix trying to eat human food. Velthrix looking confused at a small animal that humans called a cat. A children's entertainment program introduced a character called Veli the Confused Alien. Veli was purple and friendly and could not understand why humans kept wanting to hug him. Each episode featured Veli learning about human customs and usually ending up in silly situations. The show became the most watched children's program in human history. Commander Thexal reported from his observation fleet with increasing alarm. The humans are not preparing for defeat. They are preparing for integration. They act as though our invasion is already over and we have already become part of their society. They discuss what foods we might like. They debate whether our ships would fit in their parking structures. They wonder if we have families and what our children might enjoy. The effect on hegemony troops was unprecedented. Soldiers who had spent their lives preparing to face desperate enemies were encountering something completely different. Human prisoners did not cower or beg. They asked questions. They wanted to know about alien homeworlds. They offered to share meals. They told jokes that often did not translate properly. A Morkai soldier reported that a captured human had spent 3 hours teaching him a card game called poker. The human had won every round and seemed delighted about it. The Morkai soldier found himself feeling strangely disappointed when the human was transferred to a holding facility. A Thexnar interrogator complained that his human subject would not stop asking about Thexnar family structures. The human seemed genuinely interested in how Thexnar raised their young. The interrogator realized he had answered more questions than he had asked. The Rixaval reported the most troubling development. Human broadcasts were being intercepted by species throughout the hegemony. Not just military intelligence, regular citizens were finding ways to access human entertainment. The comedy, the music, the shows about friendly aliens. Species that had lived under hegemony rule for millions of years were watching these broadcasts and experiencing something dangerous. They were laughing. On the Rixaval homeworld, an underground group had started sharing human comedy programs. They gathered in secret to watch shows about aliens and humans becoming friends. They laughed together in ways they had not laughed since before the hegemony conquered them. On the Thexnar colonies, young people were learning human music. They hummed the melodies while they worked. They tapped the rhythms on their workstations. Their elders did not understand what was happening, but they could feel something changing in the air. High Archon Velthrix received reports of this cultural contamination with growing fury. He ordered the broadcasts blocked. He demanded that anyone caught accessing human entertainment be punished severely. He sent security forces to shut down the underground groups. But you cannot kill an idea by punishing the people who hold it. You cannot destroy humor by forbidding laughter. The harder the hegemony pushed, the more the forbidden content spread. Ambassador Chen Wei watched all of this from her ship with quiet satisfaction. She had studied the hegemony for decades. She knew their power rested on a simple foundation: fear. Every species in the hegemony was afraid of punishment, afraid of extinction, afraid of being different. Humanity had given them something new: permission to laugh. We cannot defeat them with weapons, Chen Wei told the United Earth Council in a secure transmission. Their fleet is too large. Their technology is too advanced. But we can defeat them with ideas. Every joke we tell plants a seed of doubt. Every song we sing weakens their grip on their own people. They rule through terror. We fight with laughter. The council debated her strategy for 3 days. Some argued that humanity should focus only on military preparation. Others worried that antagonizing the hegemony would make the invasion worse. But in the end, they agreed with Chen Wei. Humanity would fight this war on 2 fronts. They would build their defenses and prepare their military, but they would also continue their cultural assault. They would keep making movies and music and jokes. They would keep treating the invasion as an opportunity rather than a catastrophe. Velthrix watched the latest human broadcast with something approaching despair. It was a comedy show featuring an actor playing him. The actor wore an exaggerated version of his sacred robes and kept tripping over them. He delivered dramatic speeches about conquest while human characters politely offered him refreshments and asked if he needed a place to sit down. The audience laughed. They laughed at him. They laughed at everything he represented. They laughed at 11 million years of galactic dominance. Velthrix turned off the broadcast and sat in silence for a long time. He had conquered 2,000 species. He had destroyed civilizations that dared to challenge him. He had never lost a war in 9,000 years of life. But he was beginning to realize that this was not a war he knew how to fight. The humans were not attacking his ships. They were attacking his legitimacy. They were showing the galaxy that the hegemony could be laughed at. And once something could be laughed at, it could never be feared in quite the same way again. High Seer Kethril requested a private audience. When they were alone, she said something that Velthrix had never expected to hear from a Rixval. High Archon, I believe we may have made a serious error. These humans are not like other species. They have survived things that should have destroyed them. Wars among themselves, diseases, disasters. They have a word for what they do. Gallows humor. They laugh at death because it is the only way they know to keep death from winning. Velthrix stared at her. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that fear may not work on a species that has been afraid its entire existence. They have always lived with the knowledge that they might be destroyed at any moment. By themselves, by nature, by the universe itself. Our threat is just one more thing to laugh about. She paused, her forearms trembling slightly. I am suggesting, High Archon, that we may need to find another way. The diplomatic vessel emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of hegemony space. It was small and unarmed. Its hull was painted white with blue markings that human records indicated meant peace. A single message broadcast from its communication array. Ambassador Chen Wei was requesting an audience with the Grand Tribunal. The request caused chaos in the Hegemony High Command. No species had ever asked to address the tribunal before. Species begged for mercy. They negotiated surrender terms. They did not request formal diplomatic audiences as though they were equals. Velthrix wanted to destroy the ship immediately, but his advisors urged caution. The humans had proven unpredictable. Perhaps this was a trap. Perhaps this was another of their strange psychological tactics. Better to let the ambassador speak and learn what she wanted. The diplomatic vessel was escorted to the hegemony capital world. Chen Wei was brought before the Grand Tribunal in chains, as tradition demanded for representatives of unconquered species. She did not seem bothered by the chains. She walked into the great hall with her head held high and a small smile on her face. The tribunal chamber was designed to intimidate. It stretched upward for hundreds of meters, disappearing into shadows above. The representatives of 2,000 species sat in tiered galleries, looking down at the small platform where Chen Wei stood. Velthrix watched from his throne of black crystal, his ancient eyes studying this human who had caused so much trouble. You asked to speak, Velthrix said, his voice echoing through the chamber. Speak then, and tell us why we should not destroy you where you stand. Chen Wei looked up at the assembled might of the galaxy. Thousands of aliens stared back at her. Any other being would have trembled. Any other representative would have fallen to their knees. Chen Wei smiled wider. Thank you for seeing me, she said in a voice that carried clearly through the vast space. I know you are all very busy planning our extinction. I appreciate you taking time from your schedules. A murmur ran through the galleries. This was not how conquered species spoke. I came here to explain something, Chen Wei continued. I came here to tell you why your war will fail. Not because of our weapons, not because of our ships. Your military is vastly superior to ours. We know this. We have run the calculations many times. In a straight fight, you would destroy us. Velthrix leaned forward. Then why do you not surrender? Because you have made an error, Chen Wei said. A fundamental mistake in your understanding of our species. You assume that fear is universal, that all intelligent beings cower before the threat of extinction. That terror is the ultimate weapon. She paused and let her gaze sweep across the chamber. You were wrong. The murmur grew louder. Several tribunal members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Let me show you something, Chen Wei said. Let me show you the history of humanity. She had been allowed to bring a small data device. Now she activated it, and holographic images filled the chamber. Images of horror that made even the ancient members of the tribunal recoil. Cities burning, millions dead. Weapons that could destroy entire populations. Humans killing humans in numbers that defied comprehension. This is what we did to ourselves, Chen Wei said quietly, before we ever reached the stars. Before we knew you existed. We nearly destroyed our own species, multiple times. We built weapons capable of ending all life on our planet. We used them against each other. The images continued. Plagues that swept across continents, natural disasters that killed millions, famines and droughts and floods, the slow poison of a changing climate that humans had caused themselves. We have lived with extinction our entire existence, Chen Wei said, not as a distant threat, not as something that might happen someday, as a constant companion. Every generation of humans has grown up knowing that the end could come at any moment, from ourselves, from nature, from the universe itself. She turned to face Velthrix directly. You cannot frighten a species that has already looked into the abyss. You cannot threaten creatures who have survived threats far worse than you represent. We have buried our children after wars we started ourselves. We have watched our own civilization nearly collapse from disasters we created. We have seen the void, High Archon. And do you know what we did when we saw it? Velthrix said nothing. He could not look away from this small human woman standing in chains before the mightiest powers in the galaxy. We laughed, Chen Wei said. We told jokes. We wrote songs and painted pictures and made each other smile. Because that is how humans survive. Not by conquering our fear, not by pretending it does not exist, but by refusing to let it control us, by choosing joy in the face of despair, by finding humor in the darkness. The chamber was completely silent now. Every species you have conquered broke because they believed your story, Chen Wei continued. They accepted your narrative. Resistance is futile. Fear is the only rational response. Surrender is the only logical choice. But humans do not make decisions based on logic alone. We make decisions based on something you have never encountered before. She smiled again, and there was something fierce in it now. We make decisions based on spite. A shocked gasp ran through the galleries. You told us to surrender, and we refused simply because you told us to. You showed us your power, and we laughed because laughter felt better than crying. You threatened our extinction, and we responded by making movies about you because creativity is how we process trauma. Chen Wei raised her chained hands. We are not brave, High Archon. We are not fearless. We are terrified. Every human who has seen your fleet knows we might not survive. Every parent who has looked at your weapons knows their children might die. We feel the fear. We just refuse to be controlled by it. She looked out at the assembled species of the hegemony. And now your own people are learning the same lesson. They are watching our broadcasts. They are laughing at our jokes. They are discovering that fear does not have to be the only response to power. Every species in this room was conquered because they believed resistance was futile. We are showing them that belief was always a choice. Velthrix finally spoke. His voice was quieter than before. What do you want, human? I want you to understand what you are really fighting, Chen Wei said. Not our ships, not our weapons. You are fighting an idea. The idea that laughter is stronger than fear. The idea that joy is a form of resistance. The idea that the only way to truly lose is to stop being yourself. She took a step forward, chains rattling. You can destroy our planets. You can burn our cities. You can kill every human in existence. But you cannot kill what we have already spread. The jokes are out there. The songs are being sung. The stories are being told. Species across your hegemony are remembering what it feels like to laugh without permission. You cannot conquer that. You cannot destroy it. It is already too late. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Chen Wei spoke her final words. So here is my offer, High Archon. Stand down. Stop this war before it begins. And in return, we will teach you something that no species has ever taught the hegemony before. Velthrix stared at her. What could you possibly teach us? Chen Wei's smile softened into something almost gentle. We will teach you how to laugh, not at others, not in cruelty, but at yourselves, at the absurdity of existence, at the wonderful, ridiculous miracle of being alive in a universe that keeps trying to kill us all. She looked up at the ancient ruler of the galaxy. You have lived 9,000 years, High Archon. You have conquered more species than you can remember. You have achieved everything a being could achieve. And yet you have never told a joke. You have never felt the relief of laughing when everything seemed hopeless. You have never known the strange comfort of finding something funny when nothing is funny at all. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. That sounds like a very lonely way to live. The silence in the chamber stretched for what felt like forever. Then High Archon Velthrix did something he had not done in 3,000 years. He asked a question he did not know the answer to. How, he said quietly, how do you face oblivion and laugh? Chenwei looked at him with something that might have been compassion. You start by admitting that you are scared. Then you laugh anyway. It does not make the fear go away, but it reminds you that you are still alive, still capable of joy, still human, or whatever you are. That is all any of us can do. She raised her chained hands one more time. So, would you like to hear a joke? The war never happened, at least not the war that everyone expected. There were battles, hardliners in the hegemony who refused to accept that their ancient tactics had failed. Admiral Crix of the Thexanar fleet launched an unauthorized assault on a human colony world. His ships entered the system expecting terrified defenders who would break at the first sign of attack. What he found instead changed everything. The human defense fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Their ships were slower and less powerful than the Thexanar vessels. By every military calculation, they should have been destroyed within hours. But as the battle began, something strange started happening. The humans broadcast music over every open channel. Old songs from their homeworld, silly songs, songs that had no place in a battle. One channel played something humans called jazz. Another played rock music with lyrics about never giving up. A third played children's songs about friendship and courage. The human pilots chatted with each other as they fought. They made jokes about the size of the enemy ships. They complained about the quality of their lunch rations. They placed bets on who would score the most hits. One pilot announced he was dedicating his kills to his grandmother, who had always wanted him to be a doctor instead. The Thexanar soldiers had trained their entire lives for combat. They had steeled themselves to face desperate enemies fighting for survival. They had prepared for hatred and terror and rage. They were not prepared for this. A human ship was hit and began venting the atmosphere. The pilot's last transmission was not a scream or a curse. It was a joke about how he had finally found a way to get out of paying his bar tab. His wingmate laughed and promised to drink one in his memory. Then she destroyed 2 Thexanar fighters in quick succession. Another human pilot ejected from his damaged ship and immediately began broadcasting suggestions for what the Thexanar ships should be named. He thought one looked like an angry sandwich. He thought another resembled his ex-wife. He was still making suggestions when a rescue shuttle picked him up. The battle lasted 6 hours. The humans lost 7 ships. The Thexanar lost 12. By pure numbers, it was a victory for the hegemony forces. But Admiral Crix ordered a retreat. His officers were confused. His soldiers were shaken. They had won the battle, but something felt deeply wrong. They were laughing, Crix said in his after-action report. They knew they were dying, and they were laughing. We killed their friends, and they made jokes about it. I do not know how to fight an enemy like this. I do not know if it is possible to fight an enemy like this. Similar reports came from other engagements across the border. Human defenders who refused to despair, human prisoners who befriended their guards, human survivors who wrote comedy routines about their experiences and shared them across the galaxy. The effect on hegemony morale was devastating. Soldiers began questioning orders. Why were they fighting a species that seemed to genuinely like them? Officers struggled to maintain discipline when their troops were secretly watching human entertainment. Veterans of 1,000 campaigns found themselves laughing at jokes that had no translation in their languages. High Archon Velthrix watched his empire begin to fracture. Not from military defeat, not from rebellion, from laughter. The species that had been conquered millennia ago were the first to change. The Rixaval underground groups grew from secret gatherings to open protests. They did not demand freedom. They demanded the right to laugh, to create art, to tell jokes without fear of punishment. The Thexanar youth movement spread faster than any rebellion in hegemony history. They shared human music and created their own versions. They told stories about a future where species worked together instead of dominating each other. They laughed at their elders, and the elders did not know how to respond. Even the Morkai, The most loyal servants of the hegemony began to question. A Morkai philosopher published a treatise asking why the hegemony had never developed humor, why 11 million years of civilization had produced great art and science and military power, but no comedy. The treatise was banned immediately. This only made more people want to read it. Ambassador Chen Wei returned to human space with something no one had expected: an invitation. High Archon Velthrix wanted to meet with her again, privately, away from the tribunal and the councils and the weight of 11 million years of tradition. She found him in a small chamber, alone for perhaps the first time in centuries. He looked different without his ceremonial robes, smaller somehow, older, more tired. "I have ruled for 9,000 years," he said without greeting. "I have done things that would horrify you, destroyed civilizations, ordered extinctions, made decisions that killed billions, and I felt nothing, because it was necessary, because it was the way things had always been done." He looked at her with eyes that had seen more than any human could imagine. "But now I feel something. I do not know what to call it. It is not regret, exactly. It is more like wondering. Wondering if there was another way. Wondering if I could have built something different." Chen Wei sat down across from him. She did not fear him anymore. She was not sure she ever really had. "That wondering is the beginning," she said gently. "That is how change starts. Not with revolution or warfare. With one person asking if things could be different." Velthrix was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question she had been waiting for. Teach me how your species does it, how you face the darkness and still find light." Chen Wei smiled. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a rubber chicken, a toy from Earth. Completely ridiculous, absolutely absurd. The kind of thing that meant nothing and everything at the same time. "It starts with this," she said, holding up the rubber chicken. Velthrix stared at it. "I do not understand. It is an artificial animal. What purpose does it serve?" "None," Chen Wei said. "That is the entire point. It exists only to be silly, only to make people smile. There is no deeper meaning, no strategic value. It is just funny because it is ridiculous." She squeezed the chicken, and it made a squeaking sound. The sound echoed through the chamber. Velthrix continued to stare. His ancient face showed no expression. Then something happened. Something small, a tiny movement at the corner of his mandibles, a slight trembling that might have been the beginning of something. "The sound it makes," he said slowly. "It is very undignified." "Yes," Chen Wei agreed. "Very undignified. An important leader would never make such a sound. Never. It would undermine their authority completely." "Completely." Velthrix looked at the rubber chicken. He looked at Chen Wei. He looked back at the rubber chicken. Then he reached out and squeezed it himself. The squeaking sound filled the chamber again. And High Archon Velthrix, ruler of the celestial hegemony, conqueror of 2,000 species, the most powerful being in a quarter of the galaxy, felt something strange happening to his face. It took him a moment to realize he was smiling. "This is very stupid," he said. "Yes," Chen Wei agreed, smiling back. "It is very stupid. That is what makes it wonderful." The war ended not with treaties or surrenders. It ended with a rubber chicken and an ancient tyrant learning to smile. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. Not quickly, not easily, but it changed. Species that had lived in fear for millions of years discovered they could laugh. Civilizations that had never created comedy began telling jokes. The hegemony slowly transformed from an empire of terror into something stranger and more beautiful. And humanity, the small species from the unremarkable blue planet, became known throughout the stars not for their weapons or their technology or their military power. They became known as the species that taught the galaxy to laugh. Ambassador Chen Wei lived to see statues of herself erected on 100 worlds. She found this very funny. She requested that each statue be posed holding a rubber chicken. High Archon Velthrix lived another 3,000 years. He never fully understood human humor, but he learned to appreciate it. He kept the original rubber chicken on his throne until the day he died. His final words were reported to be a joke, though no one present understood the punchline. And somewhere in the vast archives of the galaxy, A document was preserved. The original declaration of war against humanity. Scholars studied it for centuries, trying to understand how such a routine threat had led to such extraordinary consequences. They never found a satisfactory answer. Because the truth was simpler than any of them wanted to admit. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play by the rules. Sometimes the greatest weapon is a smile, and sometimes when the universe tells you to be afraid, the most revolutionary thing you can do is laugh. The galaxy had declared war on humanity, and humanity had laughed, and nothing was ever the same again.